Hello and welcome to Simply Latin, wherein we take you through some of the basics of the Latin language. And at the end of this series, we will be able to read and understand some of the Latin phrases and also maybe communicate a few words in Latin as well. So, without any delay, let us enter into this course on Latin and learning all about it. First and foremost, let us try to understand the reasons for studying the Latin language. So, first and foremost, we have theological. That is, learning Latin is valuable for aspiring theologians and philosophers because a lot of theological texts are written in Latin. Knowing how to read books written by Augustine and Aquinas can help us to discover and gain spiritual knowledge that may have become lost in translation. We see that when a text is translated from its original into English, there is always some element, some meaning that tends to be lost. And therefore, when you want to do a thorough research, it is always important to go to the sources to read the text in the original language. And therefore, if you know Latin, it becomes a plus added point for you. The next reason is ecclesiastical. Latin remains the official language of the Holy See and the Roman Rite of the Catholic Church. Now, until the 1960s and still later in the Roman colleges like the Gregorian, Catholic priests studied theology using Latin textbooks, and the language of instruction in many seminaries was also Latin, which was seen as the language of the Church Fathers. The use of Latin in pedagogy and theological research, however, has since declined. Nevertheless, canon law requires for seminary formation to provide a thorough training in Latin, though we see that the use of Latin in seminaries and pontifical universities has now dwindled to the point of extinction. In most of the places, this is only a course, either a one semester or a two-semester course. Latin was still spoken in recent international gatherings of the Catholic leaders, such as the Second Vatican Council, and is still used in conclaves to elect a new pope. Another reason for studying the Latin language is linguistic. Now, many of us like to learn a new language just out of hobby, just because we want to learn it, just for the fun of it. And when it comes to spending summer holidays, some would probably spend their summer holidays learning a new language, engaging themselves in a new activity. And therefore, we see those who like to learn new languages as a hobby, they also could study Latin. Cultural. Now, you should study Latin if you want to know more about life in ancient Rome. There is no real English equivalent for Latin words like forum, patronus, and imperator. When you learn these Latin words, you also learn about the Roman political and social realities behind them. Now, language is an integral part of culture. So, by learning Latin, you will also learn about the Roman culture and society. Next, mental challenge. Latin grammar is complex, and reading a Latin sentence can be like fitting the pieces of a puzzle together. People who enjoy math and music usually enjoy Latin because it requires some of the same intellectual skills as in these disciplines. And finally, we see it is the official language of the church. So Latin remains the official language of the Holy See and the Roman Rite of the Catholic Church. Having seen the reasons why to study Latin, let us move to some of the facts about Latin. And the first, we see that the alphabet that we use every day comes to us from the Romans. It was developed from a Semitic alphabet through a Western Greek form of writing that was used by the Etruscans who dominated early Rome. And as you can see, it had only 21 letters until Y and Z were added later in order to be able to spell words that were borrowed from Greek. J and W were not used. I was both a vowel and a consonant with the sound of the present day Y. There was no sound like V. The vowel sound U as in put and the consonant sound W as in wine were written with the letter U, which in the capitals was V. Thus we see that the Latin word for light, that is lux, looked like LVX vowels in capital. Now we see that vowels were pronounced as long or short, but consonants had only one sound each, and that was much the same as it is in English. And we see that earlier, all the letters, everything was written in capital letters until the Middle Ages. It was in the Middle Ages that the small letters were invented, and many of these words have the accent as the modern day Italian language. Now let's come to the accents. Now we see that when a word has two syllables, the accent is on the first syllable. Let's take an example of clarus. Clarus. The accent is on cla, that is the first syllable. When a word has three syllables, it depends on the middle syllable. Here in this example, we have laudare, and therefore you see it depends on the accent. So laudare, which means praise. Let's come to the rules of syllabification. Now, Latin words are divided into syllables, and we see, for example, we take the example of puer. Now, if you divide the word puer into pu and er, we see that the part pu is open as it ends in a vowel, whereas er is closed as it ends in a consonant. Therefore, we see that there are many syllables as vowels and diphthongs. Consonants either begin or end a syllable. Therefore, we see that the vowel is a substance, whereas the consonant becomes the decoration around it. When it comes to accent, we see that accent is given by the diagonal mark. Sometimes when we read certain texts, we will see a diagonal mark above the word, and that indicates that the accent must be on that particular alphabet. Let's take a look at some of the examples later on, but we see that single syllable words are accented on that syllable, on the syllable where you find the diagonal mark. Let's take this example. Est, est, on E. Yam. The accent is on above A, so yam, ah. And et, the mark is on E, so you say et. So the accent is on the first et. Similarly, when it comes to rules of accentuation, we need to take a look at the two syllable words. And we see that these two syllable words are accented on the first syllable. Ecce, etche. So the accent is on the first syllable. Caesar, Caesar. So Caesar in English, but Caesar, and therefore the accent is on Caesar, on the first syllable. Now, when it comes for words with three or more syllables, the accent is on the penult if the penult is long or heavy. Now we need to understand the difference between ultimate, penult, and antepenult. So ultimate is the last syllable, the penultimate is the second last, and the antepenult becomes the third last syllable. So now we see that the accent is on the second last syllable if the second last syllable is long or heavy. Let's take a look at an example. Regina, which means queen. Therefore, we see since the second last syllable is long or heavy, therefore, we see that the accent is on G, Regina. Now the accent is on the antepenult if the penult is short or light. For example, dominus, dominus. So the third last syllable, do. Therefore, the accent is on do, dominus. Next, let us take a look at some of the characteristics of Latin language. The accent has a rhythm and it also has tones, and therefore this makes it very pleasant to hear. Just as the Italian language, it has nice rhythm and tone to it. Noun has a nucleus that does not change. Now only we see when we'll come to the declensions, when we'll be declining words, we will see that noun has the nucleus that doesn't change. Now to the root is added the ending, and the words change because of the ending, because the ending gives us a whole lot of information. Now what information does it give? Let's take a look in the next slide. The ending will tell us the gender of the word, whether it is masculine or feminine. It will also tell us the number, whether it is singular or plural, or it will also tell us the case, whether it is nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, or ablative. And therefore, we see that when we are studying the Latin language, the cases play a very important part. It is absolutely essential to understand the cases very well, because once you have mastered the use of the cases, then understanding to read the language becomes very simple in itself. So without further delay, let us enter into the cases. As I said, we have the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, vocative, and the ablative. Now, there is also the locative that is not much used in recent times. So, a noun will look different when it is the subject or the object of the verb, or when it shows possession. And here we will see few examples which exactly describe what I mean by this. Servus puellam salutat, which means the slave greets the girl. Now, who is being greeted? Okay, who is the subject? It is the slave, because the slave greets the girl. He is the one who performs the action. Another statement could be puella servum salutat. The girl greets the slave. Who is receiving the greeting? It is the slave. So, therefore, servum is the one that is receiving the action. Puella servi, that is the girl of the slave. Possession, whose girl it is? It is of the slave. So let's come to the first case, that is the nominative case. So anything which is the subject of the sentence is the nominative. For example, puella dormit, that is the girl is sleeping. So puella becomes the subject, because who is sleeping? It is the girl who is sleeping. So puella in this case is the nominative subject. And here we see that nominative must agree in number of the verb. So if puella is singular, dormit also must be singular. And in this example, we see that both of them are singular. Now let's take a look at another example. Puelle dormiunt, that is, the girls are sleeping. And here we see that since puelle is plural, dormiunt also becomes plural. And therefore we see that nominative becomes the only case that has control over the verb. It has control over how the verb changes. Next, we see that the nominative words are found on both sides of the linking verb. So if you find two words and in between you find a linking verb such as est, which is and, you could say that it is in the nominative. Let's take a look at an example. Canis est fesus. The dog is tired. So here two words are linked with is. So the dog is tired canis est. Est becomes the linking verb. And therefore, canis and fesus becomes the nominative. Let's take a look at the genitive case. The genitive case shows possession. In English, its translation would be the word of. Let's take a look at an example. Gladius militis, that is the sword of the soldier. So whose sword it is? Of the soldier. And therefore militis, which means of the soldier, becomes genitive. Next we see genitive case is also used to indicate the part of a whole. Let's take a look at an example. Pars urbis, that is part of the city. Whose part is it? It is of the city. Next, a genitive case is also used for a description. Puella maxime pulchritudines, that is a girl of greatest beauty. So here the girl is being described, and how? It is said the girl of greatest beauty. So therefore you see that anything with of tends to become genitive, and here it is describing the girl with the of, that is a girl of greatest beauty. Genitive also acts as an objective. So timor canum, okay, that is fear of the dogs. Whose fear? Of the dogs. So therefore canum becomes genitive because it is the fear of something, the fear of the dogs. Therefore canum is the genitive. The dative case. The dative case is used for indirect objects, and basically the English equivalent would be anything to do with to and for. So for example, we see it is a word that receives the direct object. For example, ego donum tibi do, that is I am giving a gift to you. Who am I giving the gift? It is to you. Therefore to you becomes the dative, that is tibi becomes dative. It is also used in terms of reference. So if you find any word giving a reference, it is in the dative case. Let's take a look at an example. Ego villam tibi edificio. So I am building a house for you. For whom am I building the house? It is for you. That is tibi. Therefore, tibi is in the dative case. Dative case is also used for possession. Mihi est equus. So I have a horse. Who has a horse? I have a horse. So if we say he has a horse, he would become the dative case. Mihi nomen est. My name is. Whose name is it? It is my name. I am possessing the name, and therefore mihi is the dative. Me is in the dative case. Let's take a look at the accusative case. Now, the accusative case is used for direct objects. So it is the words that receive the action of the verb. So let's take a look at an example. Puella puerum amat. That is, the girl loves the boy. Now, why is puerum, that is the boy, in the accusative? Well, as we said, it is the word that receives the action of the verb. Now, amat is the verb, and who is receiving the love? It is the boy. So puerum is receiving the amat. Okay, that is why puerum becomes the accusative case. Any object of some preposition also comes in the accusative case. For example, anything with the word ad. So ad villam, that is to the house, or in villam, into the house. More about prepositions we will understand at a much later time. So for now, we can say that any preposition which comes to the house or into the house could be something to do with accusative, with ad and in. Also, accusative case is used in the case of duration of time. So 3 horas, for 3 hours, or quinque dies, that is for 5 days. So anything which tells us the duration of time of a particular activity is in the accusative case. Next, we come to the ablative case, which is the complex of all cases. But there's no need to worry because we can simplify things. It turns the noun into an adverbial. And basically the English equivalent of it would be by, with, from, in, on. So as you can see, in, on tells us where the action is being done. From is the separation. With is the accompaniment. And by is how it has been accomplished. Let's take a look at an example. Gladiator gladio vulneratus est. That is, the gladiator was wounded by a sword. And how was he wounded? He was wounded by a sword, that is, by gladio. Therefore, gladio is in the ablative case. Here we see that ablative case will often answer the question how. So in a sentence, if you see something answering the question how, you know that that word is in the ablative case. Ablative also shows the time when something happened. Quarta hora, that is at the 4th hour. So anything which asks when did it happen? Well, it happened at a so and so time. So therefore that becomes in the ablative case. Ablative case also is used to indicate the object of some prepositions. For example, in villa, in the house, or ex arche, from the citadel. So in this way we see that when it comes to certain prepositions, you see we need to understand how it is formed in a sentence, and when it comes in a sentence it becomes much clearer. So therefore, when you see prepositions, you will find prepositions are also present in other cases as well, and therefore there it is important to understand the sentence, and then once you understand the sentence you will be able to find the case in the appropriate manner. Next, we have the vocative case. It is same as the nominative except for singular nouns in the second declension. What is that all about? We will come to that when we deal with the second declension. So it basically refers a person or a thing spoken to. Vocative as in vocal or vocale, that is to speak. So basically it refers to who the person or to who the thing has been spoken to. Let's take a look at an example. Marque quid novi? So Marcus, what's up? So to whom is it spoken to? It is spoken to Marque or Marcus. The famous one said in the play of Shakespeare, "Et tu Brute," and you Brutus. And here we see that anything that is spoken to a person, so the person to whom it is spoken to becomes the vocative case. So in this case, we see Marque and Brute becomes or are the words in the vocative case. So here let's take a look at a general view of all these cases. So nominative basically indicates the subject. Genitive shows us the possession of. Dative refers to anything with the indirect object, which uses the to and for of the English equivalent. The accusative, which deals with the direct object. Ablative, which deals with the adverbial, which has by, with, from, in, on. And the vocative, which refers to the person spoken to. Now we see, you may say that this is just a short summary of it. And therefore, this is how in general it is shown. As I told you, once you read the sentence, you will be able to analyze these cases in much greater detail. And as we move along this course, we will be able to understand how to identify certain cases in certain sentences. So till then, thanks for watching. and I hope that you have been able to understand the cases and the brief introduction that we had to the Latin language. If you have any questions, you can always put them in the comment section. Thank you.